Hi there, everyone. Vin Rogers Jr. once again. My name is overhead, and you know that's how you get a hold of me on YouTube. Be sure you do. Be sure you do. Today I thought I'd like to talk to you about Benedict XVI, the Pope, who is taking trips in the East, by which I mean the Near East, hoping for reconciliation between the Roman Catholic Church and various other splinter groups for a greater Christianity. He will get absolutely nowhere. He has no possibility of success, largely because of a strange thing, the word infallibility, which he and other popes claim, the doctrine of infallibility. And I'll get into that because I think, but first let's take a look at the Pope in terms of his health and his well-being, because we're much concerned about that. Anyway, here we are. Here's a recent picture of the Pope. And I want you to look very closely here, and I'll ask Ski, who is our excellent videographer, to get in there good and close so that I can explain a couple of things. First of all, I want to call your attention, this cross. It's charged with enormous emeralds. This is the kind of modest thing this man dreams up. The former Pope, you know, John Paul II, he would have nothing to do with this kind of outlandish stuff. But look at this thing. That could have been made up from Elizabeth Taylor's jewelry. Maybe bought it at auction and had him work this thing up. In any case, now this stole-like thing that priests and the Pope wear, the one that Pope's wearing, you might say, well, now that's probably something he'd hand me down. Oh, no, it's not. And I'll tell you how you can know that. Do you see this thing right here? That's a coat of arms. Now, every Pope is entitled to his own coat of arms, of their own devising, and God knows what they mean, nor do we give a damn. But here it is over here, and here is the coat of arms of Benedict XVI. A strange device, looks like a bear with a package on it. Here's a shell, and here looks to be, I don't know whether it's a black man supposed to, I don't know if it's supposed to be a cannibal king or what. God knows, anyway, I suppose he does. So at any rate, here this man is, the Pope often seems to me in these get-ups, he seems so strangely small in them. It's as if he was some sort of a midget that's been placed in this enormous costume. At any rate, he never goes anyplace but there isn't this pomposity. Now, as I say, the problem with anything that the Pope does toward Christian reconciliation is pretty largely trumped by the fact of infallibility. And I'd like to speak to you about that today a little bit, to get an idea about it. It came into being under Pius IX, who was the Pope during the part of the 19th century. And he, strange man, very strange. He was born in 1792. Well, now that would have been right in the middle of the French Reign of Terror. And he lived until 1978. Now that was a good, long life. So he lived through the Napoleonic days. He lived to the peace in Europe, the unification of Germany, the unification of Italy. All these things this man lived through. He lived a long time. And he became Pope, I think, was around 1846 or so, and reigned, are you ready for this, for 42 years. When these cardinals get together nowadays, they don't want anybody living that long because they know they're in trouble. This guy gave them a lot of trouble, those 42 years. Now I'll tell you a little bit about the guy. He came from an aristocratic family in Italy. He was of normal intelligence, not bright especially. His first choice for a career was to go into the military. And this was closed to him because he was an epileptic. His second choice for a career was to become a Roman Catholic priest. Now, there was a difficulty here. Ordinarily, they do not ordain priests who are epileptics. They didn't in those days, at any rate. I don't know what their policy is now. In those days, it was not a treatable condition. I'll get to that. But in any case, because of his strong connections with the aristocracy and the papacy, He was given a dispensation to become a Catholic priest, but with a condition that he never celebrate Mass without another celebrant be with him at all times. Well, you can understand what would happen if suddenly he's raising the host up like this, you know, and then has one of these spells and falls down where people think, my God, Satan's come right up to the floor, you know. So he must always be with somebody else. Now, in those days, they didn't really have a way of treating epilepsy. They could give them opium, that would slow them down, or they give them some sort of bromine prescriptions, but nothing really worked. And so it was left untreated, really. And he really had a bad case of it, and he had very frequent spells, with the consequence that in the fullness of time, of course, it was going to get him. It's amazing he lived as long as he did, considering his disability. But there were things regarding his personality. Some people associate it with epilepsy, others do not. Can't make much of a comment on it. I'm not a medical man, but certainly if there is such a thing as an epileptic personality, this guy had it. He was just simply arrogant. He would consult with nobody. He would go into frequent rages. He would go into having amnesia. He apparently would say one thing one day and quite another the next day in a situation that in effect made him a liar, that sort of thing. This man is the Pope. Well, almost immediately as a Pope, he begins to exert himself, and one of the first things he did was to declare the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception. Now, what this means is not that Jesus was conceived as an Immaculate Conception. That's a given. No, the idea is that Mary herself, she was immaculately conceived, that she did not have the original sin on her at any time. This is, of course, there's no precedent for it in Scripture. It's simply a construct. But it was a very popular idea, particularly the St. Mary crowd. Jesus is so remote, you can't depend on him to help you, but the mother, she can help you. So very popular. When he declared it, the Immaculate Conception, to be the official teaching of the Church, no voices were really raised against it, except already it was a prelude of something that wasn't so good, namely that he didn't consult the bishops and the other people in the Church. He just does this kind of thing unilaterally. So this was a sign of things to come. His next thing was to put out a teaching, and I'll put it on that basis, called Syllabus of Errors. And it was couched in a kind of a negative way. It would go something like this. It is an error to believe that you have a right to free speech. It is an error on your part to support democratic society. It is an error for you to believe that you are free in your conscience to practice any religion you want, and so forth. Some 80 of these syllabuses. Now, once again, he did not consult the bishops, but as it didn't matter all that much. It did to some people, curiously enough. Gladstone was the Prime Minister in England, and when he read this list, he was horrified. He realized that, or thought he saw a tyranny that would occur should the Catholics overrun England, that it would just simply dissolve popular government, which it probably would have done. The Church, as far as I know, has never repudiated this crazy thing. His next thing was infallibility. Now here he knew he was going to teach that anything in effect he said would be infallibly true and binding on Catholics. Now we'll see how they temper that a little bit, but this is the essence of it. And he had a group of cronies around him. They were toadies, really. They were people of a stature as far as theology was concerned, but they urged him on. But he knew that this time he would have to consult the bishops, not alone consult them, but bring them to Rome, which he proceeded to do that. I think this was in 1869. Called the bishops to come to Rome for the purpose of a consideration of the teachings of the Catholic Church. That's about all the bishops knew at this point. They were being called. In those days, going to Rome, that was a kind of a difficult thing. You're talking about, there were trains, of course, and there was ocean transport, but there were no automobiles or anything of that sort. So it was a very difficult thing. So they're coming from all over the world. Some of them from South America, particularly. That's a long distance. And they come to Rome, and they have a meeting, and the meetings are held in St. Peter's Basilica, in that enormous church where the acoustics are awful. You can't hear much of anything. It's all garbled. I think they did it quite deliberately. The bishops weren't even informed as to what they were considering when all of a sudden came the matter of infallibility was put on the table. The arguments would go on, and the bishops would say, well, can I have a copy of today's agenda? Can I have a copy of some of these speeches? Oh, no, you don't need those, and so forth. All of a sudden, great pressure was brought on some of the bishops who were already inclined not to grant this to the Pope. They were threatened that their bishoprics would be taken away. They wouldn't get any money. The money would be given away, and all this kind of stuff. Some of them, knowing that they would be literally forced to agree to this crazy business, decided to leave Rome. Well, some of them managed to escape. Actually, some of them did, but others didn't move fast enough, and they were just literally trapped. I mean, they were literally prisoners of the Vatican. Well, infallibility was finally declared as a. There was a strange cardinal who didn't want to go along with it, and he came to the Pope, and he said, "Holy Father," he says, "you know, this is against tradition." And the Pope looked down at him and just thundered. He says, "I am tradition." The strange thing about this cardinal was this: you can find practically no background on his youth whatsoever. And he had a remarkable resemblance to the Pope. Many people think that he was the illegitimate son of Pope Pius IX, who apparently in his earlier days was something of a lad, if you get my meaning. Now the question is, let's just ask the question, was there any precedent for the idea of infallibility? And the answer is yes, but curiously it worked against the idea of infallibility. Here's what happened. In the 12th century, I think it was, a Franciscan comes to the Pope, Pope Nicholas III, and he says, we have been given this gift of land, and we're concerned that, you know, somewhere down the line, somebody else is going to claim it. Now, Holy Father, you are infallible. So if you declare this gift to be rightfully ours, infallible, because it's infallible, that land will be ours in perpetuity. And Nicholas quickly agreed that he certainly, oh yes, I'm infallible, and yes, the gift is yours by all means. Enjoy. Well, future popes didn't quite see it that way. And in the following century, I think it was the 12th or 13th or 14th, I'm not quite sure. Anyway, there was a Pope, John the 22nd, and he was asked about his infallibility and then referred to this matter of Nicholas III. He declared it as a heresy even to discuss the possibility of a Pope being infallible. It was a ridiculous notion, and it's a heresy. I don't want to hear it. And other popes came along and said the same thing. So what in effect Pius IX had done, he trumped all these other people. Question is, how infallible is infallibility? Well, the Church likes to say it only applies in cases of teaching and very official kinds of things. It's only been used once since, and that was in 1950, when Pius XII declared that the Virgin Mary, when she died, was moved bodily up to heaven. And that's an official thing. Now, Catholics are obliged to believe that. But there's so many people that have said this. They've said, wait a minute here. Suppose a Pope says something about the Assumption of Mary. Now, suppose he makes any comments or allocutions or any arguments, would that be infallible? And Pius XII himself says, oh yes. He says, when I'm speaking about these things, I'm infallible with regard to these things. Well, of course, what this amounts to, he's infallible with regard to anything he says. Now, it's that adds to the burden of poor Benedict the... Let me get over here. It's interesting, my friends, that John the 22nd he declared the heresy of the idea of infallibility. It's interesting that when Pope John the 23rd came to the papacy in 1958, I think it was, he chose the name of John the 23rd. One has to wonder if he wasn't talking about John the 22nd, who had argued against the idea of this infallibility, because one of the first things that John the 23rd did, was to call all the bishops to Rome for Vatican II, whose purpose may well have been originally to do something about the doctrine of infallibility. John the 23rd never lived long enough to achieve everything that I think he may have wanted to do. In any case, let's have one more look at this poor devil. He's in the East, he's meeting all these people, supposedly equal, but of course with all the emeralds and stuff that's weighing him down. He has to face them, knowing that they know his role with regard to the bishops and the clergy in the United States and in Ireland and so forth, the pedophiles schemes that he tried personally to cover up. They know also about about the bank, which has now become once again a creature of the mafia. They know also about his own private butler disclosing records and memos and so forth that shows the corruption within the church itself, dealing contracts to cronies and that sort of thing. His chances of any reconciliation with the other Catholic communities is virtually zero. I'll see you next time. Maybe I'll have more pictures. Do you like pictures? This is, after all, a graphic medium, isn't it? I could change my voice. In fact, I'm going to have to use spray, something like that, so that I don't sound so ancient. Well, I am actually ancient, and my voice is evaporating as we speak. So I'm going to save it for next time. Goodbye.